Hello, welcome back to All for United WFC. We're still looking a little bit back. We're looking back to obviously the Chelsea game, as the title explains, and things like that in the thumbnail. That's why you're here. And we've pulled out the big gun for this one. Mariam from She Scores Banger, our YouTube channel, Twitter page. If people, I'll be amazed if people don't know who you are, to be honest. But great to have you on and to talk all things United Chelsea. Firstly, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Well,
could be better.
Result, yeah, not too good after the defeat, but you know, it was still a good day out and everything else. So, good. But yeah, obviously we're here to talk about we're going to do a bit more of a deeper dive into the tactical side of the game. What we saw, we're going to talk about United's quick start, how United utilised the press, Toone on the right wing. That's going to be an interesting conversation point as well. So we're going to get into all that. Kindly, Mariam has done some nice little graphics for us, which I'm going to bring on screen, which is going to make this a hell of a lot easier to go through. So we're going to start, funny enough, right at the start. United's quick start that we had to the game, as you can see, obviously on the timer, everyone knows it by now. The Goldson, it was correct, offside goal. Yeah. But what we're going to focus on here, I think I'll let you kind of explain what we're seeing here as we flick through the slides. But United on the front foot right from the start, as you've highlighted, Toone, Goldson, obviously Russo's in the picture there as well, on the front foot from the start. So I'll just let you kind of explain these first few images that you've got on screen here.
Yeah, I think, well, that's a great start. You said they were on the front foot literally from the get-go, right after the kickoff start. But I think what was quite interesting to see here in the first clip as well is, and we're going to be able to highlight this as we go, is how involved Toone was in connecting the fullbacks and the forwards, kind of that like middle piece puzzle in the midfield that kind of put everything together. And so this was obviously a dispossession from the Chelsea midfield, 10 seconds into kickoff. But what's so interesting to see is how close Toone and Goldson are in the middle. I mean, they're obviously going to end up in very, very different positions at the end of the sequence. But I mean, just comparing where Toone is and Goldson from that mid bit of the field, they're kind of both relatively in the middle, which is, again, we're going to be able to elaborate on further on in this video today. But obviously Battier, one of the best with intercepting the ball, and I think she had some really good numbers with how many balls she intercepted from the get-go. She's able to intercept. It was a quick, I believe, 1-2 with Paris here, and then if you're able to keep a good eye on Toone, she connects the ball really, really well. If I'm able to move here. Maybe I'm not able to move. I am able to move. Okay, yeah. So she's able to connect the ball with Toone here, and it's almost she's able to overlap really good with Russo and Paris, which again was so important because it gave her that free ability to roam around. She's able to kind of, if drag players out of Russo, put players on Russo where she's still playing around. But that is what made her so good in this game, just connecting these passes. So right from the get-go, you can see she's pulled wide and Goldton's still able to stay in the middle, connects that passes between Battier, the fullback, in the middle. She's a midfielder. And then Goldton straight away up front. Now, obviously, this was an offside goal, like you mentioned, probably caused a lot of happiness. And then all of a sudden that was all gone. But I think from the get-go, you were able to see that Toone was going to be a very important key player in putting these passes together. I think you can probably elaborate on that as well, Connor.
No, for sure. You'd bang on. It was about 10 seconds of happiness. The guy next to me was tapping me, trying to tell me it was offside. I was having none of it. I was just celebrating away. But no, that's something definitely as we get into the next section as well, when you talk about Toone's kind of influence. I think we're going to notice a pattern here, whereas we talk about what went right for United from the get-go, and obviously what went a little bit wrong as we talk about Toone kind of moving out on the right. But what I think has amazed me in those two images there, you're looking at the difference in, it's 5 seconds from Honor having the ball at right back to 5 seconds later, you've got Paris alongside Toone pretty much, Russo out on the right, and Goldton's already pretty much inside the box within 5 seconds. And that to me, again, surprised me how quick United started, considering this is not something we're used to playing in these finals. But, I know some of these players are used to playing at Wembley, but yeah, that's what really took me by surprise, that kind of quick start, winning the ball back and on the front foot straight away.
Quick concessions. And I think it was going to be a game of who's going to be faster on the counterattack, who's going to be faster to be able to move the right bodies in the right positions faster. And United did this perfectly in the first half. It was, obviously, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but a shame that they couldn't clinically finish because, as we'll see in the sequences, 2-3 passes and they're already in the third quarter, the half, and almost in the box as well.
No, for sure. I mean, obviously, moving on to the kind of next section. This is obviously a big part of what we've just discussed in that first bit. Obviously, it says wide movement there. It's kind of our attacking transition, and what you've just said there in terms of one or two passes straight away can lead to opportunities for United, and how quick we attack, and also how we utilize Honor and Hannah. So I'll just let you talk through these next few images.
Yeah, I mean, Ona Battier obviously has been quite crucial throughout the entire season, playing an inverted fullback role so well, but being able to balance her offensive and attacking work pretty well. I thought Blundell also was more so involved this game than not, pulling up forwards a little higher than we usually see her. I think, especially looking at the majority of WSL games, she kind of tends to stay a little bit backwards, but that's not kind of to take a hit on her. It's just sometimes you don't want to overcommit both your fullbacks. But I thought even when United did that this time around, it was quite beneficial. But even again, this was in the first half as well. You've got Maya Letitia connecting the ball with Battier here as well. Again, you can see how high Battier and Blundell are. It was a quick ball to Battier again, who's the middle person connecting that second to third pass to the forwards. Toone, so quick, so fast, and you can almost tell sometimes the Chelsea players aren't. They're almost caught off guard by the speed of the transition or the speed of the movement of the ball that United were putting in together. So it's a quick Letitia, Battier, Toone, really fast. All of a sudden, she's released Battier again. And you can see three of the Chelsea players just chasing after them. And that was 3 passes, if I'm counting correctly. And that, I mean, on the 21st minute here in the first half, this happened so occasionally and on various occasions where you've got Toone be able to flow in the middle, connect those passes, either releasing Russo or Paris or Battier, but she was the middleman in pretty much every single wide movement that was quite successful in that first half. This was another moment as well, and on the other side of the wide wing, Galton, she was receiving the ball, dropping a little bit deeper to get that ball. Who's that man connecting everything together? Toone. And this was actually a really nice sequence. She was able to back heel, not Mega. It was just like Toone style. Again, Galton getting the ball really nicely, just laying it off to Toone really fast, just one pass movement. Boom. She's releasing her into this really empty space. And you can see, again, the Chelsea players are flooding behind her. Fleming, I mean, she's a number 10. She really shouldn't even be that deep, but you can tell how off guard a lot of these players are being caught with Toone's movement. And I can't remember exactly where the ball went here, but you can tell Russo's wide open. Paris is making a move either from the outside or the inside. It didn't really matter. But again, 3 passes and you're going in on a very good attacking movement. The players are chasing after you. It happened on multiple occasions. Again, players are chasing after you. Toone always ahead of them.
Is that the key then in this kind of this sequence of play that we're talking about here? You've used examples from the left and from the right, so it's clearly you're talking about Toone as being the figurehead almost in this, because you can see her there on the wide left. We saw her on the right, obviously in the first couple of images there with Honor on that right hand side. Is it about taking the opposition midfield out of the game? You put the picture up a second ago showing that one pass into Toone, all of a sudden there's 3 Chelsea players behind. In that image there, that little flick from Toone through the legs, all of a sudden that whole Chelsea midfield is bypassed, and it's a 3-on-3 in that particular image.
Yeah, I think the game was won here in the midfield. In that first half, I definitely give United's midfield the up, but the second half, we obviously saw Harder come in and completely change the dynamic of the game. But it wasn't just Harder being added to the Chelsea midfield that changed things, but it was also Toone being taken out of that United midfield that kind of also gave him a disadvantage. So it was like one team got an advantage right away, the other team got a disadvantage. They were so unbalanced, where Chelsea pretty much won the game from that midfield. So for me, this game was going to be who's going to be faster on the counterattack and who's going to be able to beat those midfield battles. And I'm sure we'll be able to discuss what happened when Toone was taken out of that midfield.
No, definitely. I'm just looking at the next couple of images. If you move it on just a couple there, so you're talking about kind of the similar kind of thing here, where it's 1 or 2 passes. Obviously, in this instance, it's Blundell. So I just wanted to ask you, really. Obviously, this is Chelsea actually putting us under a bit of pressure. I think that's Lauren James pushing up to Millie Turner there. Even when we're being pressed, United seem to be able to play. Is that something you noticed in this game in particular? That's Blundell, pretty central, not centralist, but she's almost in line with where Turner is. So she's come pretty central there. And I think if you move the image on, it's Blundell that then plays that pass forward into Russo. And as you can see there, you've got 4 then on the back line, and the Chelsea midfield is completely bypassed again. So is that something, even if it's maybe, Toone is clearly the figurehead there, but United have a lot of players that can potentially do that. That it's very direct, 1 or 2 passes into the forward line and bypass the Chelsea midfield. Is that something you think worked well? You just said there it worked well in United's favour in that first half.
Yeah, and that's all about being positionally aware of where your opponent is and where you need to be to receive that ball. Obviously, I mean, Lauren James is not a player that really presses, so I think this is one of the odd occasions that she actually was pressing Millie Turner, but clearly that receiving person, or the one who's able to intercept the ball, is aware to not move far wide, where if she is to move far wide, she's going to have to go back to probably Mary Earps or move the ball back to Millie Turner. So that kind of quick concession, keep it in the middle. I mean, obviously you're playing high risk, high reward, but in these kind of games, a final at Wembley, playing high risk, high reward probably isn't the worst decision. So receiving that in the middle, again, straight off to Russo, 3 passes, and they've already gone through the defensive line of their own United defensive line, Chelsea's midfield, their own midfield, and they're already with the attackers. So fast. I mean, I think, and Russo right here receives the ball. Galton is on the overlap, receives that ball, and off she goes. And you can see just the Chelsea player all, running behind her. 3 passes and you're in to go, which again just talks about their positionally awareness. And clearly this is something they discussed and probably drilled very hard. And I think probably executed on a very, very good day. I think we have seen this pattern happen throughout the season, but not to this precision in my eyes, at least. And I think obviously Chelsea was caught, I don't want to say on a bad day because they did win it and it wasn't necessarily a bad day, but often you'd see them press a little bit better and close on these gaps. But it takes a team like United to be aware of that, the fact that your opposition is falling off and you being able to step it up. Teams often get a little bit afraid of Chelsea, or they could be scared of what Chelsea has to offer, and this was not the attitude, I don't think, from United in the first half. They saw Chelsea was dipping off, they did exactly what they needed to do, play these quick halves or quick balls to get into the other half on the wide movement, and it was quite successful, I'd say.
What's interesting in particular in that clip, just before we move on to what went, I guess, wrong for United in that second half. Obviously, I know the harder sub obviously made an impact. We're going to focus specifically on a United point of view with Toone there. Blundell follows that pass on. She's the one that's played it into Russo, and you can see on that little image there, Blundell's now followed it on, and she's higher than where Russo is, because Russo is obviously on the turn. She's played it out wide, and you've got 5 United players there on the front foot, and it's an even number in attack versus defense again. So certainly something we utilized well in the first half, and I think that's why we created, although not a lot of shots on target, I think the stats are a little bit misleading. We did dominate a lot of the ball and had a lot more of those, I guess, progressive passes into the final third to create opportunities.
Agreed.
So that's all the positive. Well, we're going to get to what United did well in the press towards the end, because we thought we'd end on a bit of a positive, but certainly something that a lot of United fans noticed that I think went wrong. I don't think many people need to be, a tactical analyst or a genius to work this one out. Toone out on the right. Now, we've seen this a couple of times this season, where we've seen either Toone out there, Wilders had a short spell out there as well. We saw Williams had come on. The only explanation I think we can think of, you might be able to think of another one, is pure physicality. With Ingle and Harder coming on, probably thought we need some extra physicality in there. Whether that was the right sub or not, again, don't think it is.
Up to debate.
Do you just want to show us, obviously, this is from a throw-in not long after Williams has come on there. So Williams is obviously actually where I would expect her to be as a striker, not as a 10, where she was predominantly playing. But the position of Toone and Russo and Williams in this little phase of play from the throw-in.
Yeah, this is going to be quite important. I think this is where really that momentum shifted. Toone had been so successful connecting those passes. Paris as well, I thought, was causing a lot of chaos. I mean, she was going on the left wing, on the right wing, whichever kind of suited her, whichever position she was in, to mix it up a little bit. So I think taking off Paris to start with probably maybe had to come in a little bit too early. I think, like you, I'd echo the fact that it was a physicality thing with Harder coming on. Obviously, much more physical than Fleming is, and Williams is another physical. You'd even give her the up on the physicality with Harder. But that came at a cost of moving Toone on the wing, which almost pretty much wasted exactly what she was doing in the first half. So like you mentioned, this was just a throw in briefly after they came in the 62nd minute. I mean, you can always be speculative, but I almost wonder if Toone hadn't been shifted to that side, had she been occupying this middle space, which we had seen her occupy the entirety of the game. And there was multiple throw-ins as well, where she was calling for that ball in the middle. So her being shifted on the side, she had to be there because it's almost like that's the duty that she was given to. We'll see now she's going to clash a little bit with Russo, but Bathier's looking. She's, I mean, really not many options other than on this side. She goes to this side, and you actually see that Williams tracked back in, and it's a very tight huddle here. But you've got Eriksson obviously covering that behind bit, but you've got Russo and Williams crashing in, and Toone still kind of, what is she doing? Is she intercepting? Again, had she been possibly stayed in the middle or not shifted to the back, you'd wonder if this question mark space would have been occupied by herself, because we've seen her work really good triangles with Battier, Russo, and Toone. Again, you don't want to speculate, but you could almost wonder what would have happened if she had been there in the middle. And this actually leads to dispossession. Toone kind of does get a little bit involved, but the ball gets lost, and all of a sudden they've lost possession. Not really your ideal sequence, right? Considering you did start with the ball, you had a player that was shifted out wide, and you've lost possession. Again, she hadn't really interacted. She's staying on the wing really where she needed to be. You still got Russo and Williams both dropping in pretty deep to try and resalvage that possession.
I think on that clipping or that phase, I guess in particular, it just looks like confusion to me, because Toone is where I would expect a right winger to be. To be honest, I don't think she's out of position, certainly not from a throw in. But you've got Williams and Russo challenging for the same ball, so you've got two players occupying the same place, three once we've been dispossessed. So that's three United players out of the game. Just from one interception, purely because Toone is not quite sure where to go. You've got Russo and Williams going for the same ball. The midfield is pretty solid. You've still got Ladd and Zellum covering the midfield, so it's not going to be bypassed quickly. And I can't remember how this phase of play went, but if it was a ball over the top, for example, it might do. But you're looking at that space there. There's such a big gap. And as you highlighted in the first half, that's where Toone was occupying. When you're looking at those spaces, Williams, if you take Williams out of that picture for the time being, let's pretend she's not there. I would imagine Paris is somewhere there. Russo's more occupying the other centre half. In the middle, and Toone is in where that question mark is. And then you've got a bit more options. Maybe the throwing goes to Zellum, goes to Toone, goes to the right winger, Paris, whoever it was that would have been out there at the time. And you can start building through then. And I think obviously in the next couple of slides, we can really see that gap emphasized even more
on multiple occasions.
So this is something else that we wanted to highlight. Obviously, when we're talking about attacking phases, what we lost, I think, as you said earlier on, United lost a bit of momentum when Paris went off. And one of the things that we lack then is that kind of person in the middle linking it all together. The two players obviously highlighted, Toone and Williams there. So I don't know if you want to talk us through this one in terms of, what is wrong with this in terms of you've got Williams that's pretty much alongside Ladd, Zellum's ahead of her. Toone is where I would expect, again, a right winger to be, but there is absolutely nobody in that central space. So is that maybe what caused United problems, that we just couldn't keep the ball for long enough, whereas in the first half we could transition quite quickly. In the second half we couldn't, because Williams, as good a player as she is, she's not going to catch up to Galton or to Russo with her pace, and we don't have anyone in the middle to play those passes around to the wide players.
Yeah, and I think we briefly just mentioned as well, is that this game was going to be won on a counterattack, on a fast counterattack, and in the midfield. And specifically in the sequence, you don't really have your midfield. And because you don't have your midfield, you don't have the options to have a quick counterattack. I know this was off a counterattack, but your Williams, your striker, should not be back this far. Look at all the space. I mean, you've got a referee and you don't have a player in there. That's when you know it's a place where they want to occupy. Toone, again, like you mentioned, exactly where you'd want her to be, but they're moving the ball forward. It was almost like a shoot and hope Russo can catch up with her pace, but look at all that space. Again, you could wonder, had Toone slipped in there and almost had actually Paris in here. Ignore the fact that Williams still is so far back. You could wonder, Galton down to Toone, down to Paris, boom, all of a sudden you're in front. And this it's not even bizarre to be like, think about a few moments, think about a few passes, all of a sudden you're forward, because that's exactly what was happening. So it's like the sequence that happened so often in that first half was stripped away. And this is the 77th minute, you're 10 minutes in, or 10 minutes to go. one nil down, you know, this momentum was just completely shifted over to Chelsea, and I think Skinner would probably be beating himself up a little bit for the substitutions had they been a little bit wrong, had the players been shifted incorrectly. I know you touched on that in the show right after the game. I mean, what do you see from the sequence?
I think that's exactly the thing there. You know what I said? I think Toone is in the right position if that's Paris. You can see Garcia just readying up to come on. But I think one of the points I was going to make on this particular sequence, even if Russo wins that ball, it goes out for a throw, and I think she gets dispossessed anyway.
Yeah, this
Even
is
if Russo
right
wins
here.
it, where is she going? She's got two players on her, unless she's going to beat both players and run down the line, which obviously would be a spectacular goal. There's nobody anywhere near her. Galton's almost given up on that ball. Like she said, it was almost like a hit and hope. You can tell by her body language, she's pretty much gone. There you go. Try and do something with that. And Williams, Zellum, Lads, and even the fullbacks are not even in shot. You know, you've got nobody. Whereas in the first half, whether it was an energy thing, whether the players were tired a little bit, but when you're looking at these images in the first half, particularly this one that you've just brought
It's
up,
the same players that are
it's
involved.
exactly the same. You've got Toone there in the middle, so Russo could, you know, I know she plays this pass to Galton, but could have gone to Toone. You've got Paris out on the right, Blundell's bombing forward, Galton's bombing forward, and you've got options. Whereas you see later in the game where we lost that kind of momentum, we don't have that same play like focal point in the middle, and it became a bit of hit and hope. Whether that was nerves, whether that was energy, but I think a big part of that was the fact that Toone just wasn't there, or a natural number 10 or an 8 at least wasn't in that position. You're putting on Rachel Williams for as good as she's been. That's not her position. She is not a midfielder. So if you go back just one slide for me, when you've got her there, you know, I think she just won the ball back. I don't think it was her that won the ball back. I think it was Ladd in this play.
Yeah.
Like I said before, Williams is not going to make up that ground because that's just not the player she is. And she's almost redundant there. You know, as I said, in the next slide, they're not even in shot. Nobody's even anywhere near. So even if Russo wins that ball, she's got to hold it up for so long for the other players to get involved. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think when Mark's watching this back, I think right thing to maybe match the physicality.
Yeah.
The wrong thing to move to in our position, because I think it just completely stifled anything we had,
Yeah.
any creativity that we had.
Agreed. And a lot of the sequences that we did look at in the opposition half, or at least in Chelsea's half at this point, United would have enough players to either almost have more player. How do I say this? What I was trying to say is almost in every sequence that we did see just earlier is that United had more players than the Chelsea players, or the exact same amount. Whereas here, you're playing a 4v2, maybe if you're considering Toone in there. Whereas earlier, you almost had at least 4 or 5 players up there matching Chelsea's players. Chelsea's not a team that you want to undertake, or a team that you're like, you know what, let me do a 2v3. Good luck, but certainly not a team you want to do that against, and especially not Wembley on when you're losing. So when you're seeing all these numbers be low, the creativity is low, your most creative player, in my opinion, during that game is taken way out wide. That's really not a great telling of the substitutes that you just put on, and the movements that you just ask the players to do.
No, 100%. It was definitely something. Well, one of the reasons we highlighted it for that exact reason, because we did feel it certainly stifled our attack. Obviously, as you can see in that frame, Garcia did come on, but I think by that point it was a little bit too late, because, again, I think even when Garcia and Mannion came on, the players didn't fully understand exactly where they were supposed to be. I think there was just too much change, too much confusion to the rhythm that we had. So, yeah, looking back, maybe a wrong one on that one. But as we said at the start, he did set us up correctly, clearly, because obviously we were creating chances, and that's something we'll move on to for the final section. How United kind of utilised the press defensively and offensively, because there is obviously the two types of press. You can press from the front, or you can have a real kind of rapid high press from not high press. You can have a rapid kind of quick transitional press from your defensive line. So I'll let you kind of kickstart this. Again, we're talking early on, 3 minutes in, and I'll just let you kind of fire away
from the get-go. Yep. Quite impressively. I mean, you can tell United were trying to win the ball quite high up on the pitch. Again, a very courageous thing to do against a team like Chelsea. And this probably caught Chelsea a little bit off guard as well, because they were falling into it. You can tell 5 players up very high. I can't exactly. I think that's probably Aaron Cuthbert trying to go backwards. But again, Chelsea is not a team, if you've watched them, that like to go backwards. I mean, they have to when they're being pressured, but often they like to play diagonally. They like to play those long balls with Sam Kerr. And obviously, if Millie Bright had been fit, you could just almost just picture these long balls happening because that's how Chelsea like to play. But they were pressured quite high on the pitch. This was just, again, from the get-go, from the start. This is the same sequence. They had gone back to the goalkeeper down in the middle. Again, really not many options here. You can just tell 6 United players up, overwhelming them, very up high on the pitch. Had a mistake been happening or a dispossession take place, you have a lot of players that you could count are able to intercept it. This was another moment I thought Lad did brilliantly in pressing, but pressing Jessie Fleming, again, playing that number 10, she really shouldn't be playing that far back anyway, but pressing her, and you've got the 3 players covering this a good line of diagonal if she used to switch the play or, possibly do some crazy bit of skill and go backwards to Eriksson, whatever it is that she had, not many options. And this was a dispossession. She loses the ball and it's a throw in from United. And this is exactly what happens, that early start, early pressure, very high up on the pitch, causing this dispossession always. And I think Lad did a lot of that dirty work, maybe not given enough praise on how much pressing work she really did, covering a lot of spaces, just really not allowing those Chelsea midfield players to have anything. Again, we were talking about the counter attack and that midfield, and on the pressing work, it was just brilliant. This was another piece of Lad as well, I believe. Again, on Fleming, just covering so much ground where Chelsea, if they wanted to move the ball, there's a chance of losing it. United almost always intercepted it. And this was, again, in the 44th minute. They were able to keep this up for the entirety of the first half, which is quite tiring. I could understand why sometimes players or teams in generally lose some of that press work in that second half. But clearly in that first half, so well. This was another point as well. You can tell Toone closing that distance we were just talking about. You've got Paris and I believe, is that Golton? No, Russo quite high. Golton behind her. Similar boot color though. They're trying to get rid of the ball. So this is another instance of, right, they actually did get rid of the ball. Before you even know it, wrong. Before you even know it, you've got Battier in. She intercepts the ball. I mean, it's probably hard to see how fast it happened, but just imagine Chelsea's trying to put the ball backwards. All of a sudden, Battier's coming in. Turnover. You've got the ball. Happened so many times.
The interesting point on this one, again, this is in the second half now, so we're still playing. And I think this goes back to why moving Toone out wide and taking Paris off was both kind of the wrong thing. Because even from a defensive point of view, moving into attacking transitions, that's Battier there, as you said, winning the ball back, and it's Paris in the right position, and you've still got Toone in the middle. Whereas I think later on, if we'd have done this, and let's say once Paris had gone off, that ball's going to Toone out on the right, and there wouldn't have been anyone really in that kind of central zone. And every bit of pressing, whether you've highlighted there, you've got somebody in the centre, you've got your right and your left wing, and you've got your striker there in the right positions. Even in the ones in the first half that you highlighted, there's that, as you said, that cover. If a ball is to be switched, let's say, that ball switched over to the left-hand side. I think that's Wrighton on the far side. If that ball is switched, Paris is close enough to backpedal, and you've still got the cover of Honor on that right-hand side as well. So something that clearly worked for United, as you said, Lad, I don't think got enough praise on the day because she's the one pressing high, but also has that cover from the midfielders and also the attackers around her. Because I think a lot of people expect when you say teams are pressing high, you don't always have to press with your strikers. It can come, as you've shown, from Toone, from Honor on the right hand side, and from Lad from midfield as well.
Yeah,
100%. So brilliant work from a United point of view. From that, obviously, we know what the outcome was, so we don't go over that. Is there anything else that you noticed maybe in the game, or anything else to cover off? I guess from everything that we've covered in this, obviously the pressing play, I guess the moving Toone out on the right. Is there anything else that you noticed that United maybe could have done, should have done, anything from that point of view? Or do you think that Chelsea on the day, Harder came on, obviously made a difference, and anything else?
And that's really all Chelsea need is one shot, have your Sam Kerr and your Pernilla Harder up top, and they can bury that game. That's why they're just so clinical and so frustrating for any opponent to go up against. I think a lot of fan bases just probably are not a big fan of what Sam Kerr has done to their team because it's just how clinical she is. Obviously, you can have that argument of United probably should have finished their chances in that first half, and they definitely got some worthy chances in the second half, but you can almost wonder if that shift of momentum or possibly even the energy being depleted of Russo because she had to drop in on so many occasions because Toone was taken out wide, did that possibly tire out her legs? Again, you can only assume, but definitely a very plausible discussion. So they'll be beating up themselves for missing some of these chances in that first half. You could certainly say, well, is it down to experience? Is it pressure? It could be various points that you can these are only learning experiences that they can take on in the future, and I doubt this is the last final that United will be appearing in. I think it showed promise. That first half, they'd be very proud of themselves, and they're coming up against a team that just drew with Barcelona. They just beat Lyon in the Champions League. So I think for them, sure, this is obviously a very disappointing result. Could have been a very different result had those chances be utilized well in that first half. But they walk away pretty proud of the battle they put up against a team that many teams don't want to press, and many teams don't want to be the first to intercept, and many teams that don't want to commit their fullbacks, because it's understandable. It's a high risk, high reward with Chelsea, and to not have been, beat down so badly compared to the results that we've seen earlier on in the season. I know the first fixture between them in the WSL this season, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a 3-1 defeat. And they weren't really pressing them. You could tell there was redundancy of not to press. This was not the narrative this time around. So clearly there are a lot of learning lessons that have happened, a lot of lessons to take on. And I think a lot of lessons here to consider substitutions and hopefully players to better utilize moving forward, with the example of not taking Toone away from the middle.
Yeah, we don't want to be seeing that again, that's for sure. And it's hard to argue with your analysis there. I noticed my camera's got a bit blurry. This late in the recording, I'm not going to try and sort this. I hope it focuses by the time I wrap this one up. Before we wrap this one up, and anyway, where can people find you? I know you do obviously a YouTube page as well. Obviously, I see you got your Twitter out there as well. But just if you want to give people a brief who maybe don't know who you are, what your YouTube channel's about, what you post, and how people can go and subscribe to that.
Yeah, so on YouTube, it'll be She Scores Bangers. So with an S at the end is a plural. Twitter handle everywhere else is She Scores Banger without the S. There's not a lot of character space, so I had to stick with a singular. But yeah, weekly, twice a week uploads talking about women's football, covering some of the major leagues. Some of them are analysis videos, quite similar to this. Some of them are talking about player performances, contracts, news, kind of keeping you in the loop. As well as I'm very happy to have fun guests come on every now and then and talking about just ongoing things happening in the game. Obviously, there's big World Cup coming up and a lot of discussions around that. So yeah, diverse, fun little YouTube channel. I think that you can join on the game.
Definitely, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you go and do that after this. I hope to see a few new. I hope to see that number go up after this show goes out. So make sure you go and do all of that. Mariam, you've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for giving up your time to record this one with myself.
Thank you, Connor.
Obviously, make sure you're liking the video and subscribing, all that jazz. You've watched this channel before. You know what to do. So make sure you're doing all that. Obviously, check out Mariam's channel as well. And we shall see you guys.